Hi, I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Monday, April 20th with news from Arkansas. The big news will be tomorrow, I think, in Little Rock. The Little Rock City Board of Directors will vote on an ordinance that extends some new measures of protection under the civil rights law to gay, lesbian, transgender people. It's a question that's up in the air right now. The big news came Sunday night. City Attorney Tom Carpenter released an opinion he'd written that was requested by City Director Joan Adcock, who appears to oppose this ordinance. She asked the question of whether this would create a conflict with a new state law that's intended to prohibit cities and counties from passing ordinances that extend civil rights protection that are not already granted somewhere else in state law. This finally gave Carpenter to reveal something that's been a poorly kept secret among opponents of these anti-gay bills, but that they hadn't advertised much because they didn't want the legislature to correct the oversight. Arkansas law, in fact, in a couple of areas, bullying legislation for one, provision of domestic abuse services for another, some protections on genetic identification for another, does already provide in the law some protection for people based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Tom Carpenter's opinion says, therefore, the city can pass a law that does require businesses who want to do the business with the city to not discriminate against people based on sexual orientation. He also said a much more important thing that I think is worth noting. In the lawsuit that struck down the state's criminal statute on sodomy, the Supreme Court said the state constitution's equal rights protection was inviolate, that there was no reason to discriminate against somebody based on simply who they were sexually. That's a message that's well worth considering. Needless to say, the people who pass this anti-gay law don't think much of Tom Carpenter's opinion. I think this ordinance does give an opportunity to challenge the state law in court. I hope the right thing will be done by city directors tomorrow night and pass this small, modest message that's a step forward for equal rights for all, but that's yet to be seen. Wesley Clark, the chairman of the City Airport Commission, wrote a letter to the city board saying he's for equality under the law for all people. He notes that the Little Rock Airport already has a non-discriminatory policy on sexual orientation at the airport. The subject of equal rights based on sexual orientation is also much in the news in Eureka Springs. It's going to vote May 12th on whether it will keep its own civil rights ordinance, which is broader than the one being considered in Little Rock. There's an intense campaign underway, canvassing door to door. I think every voter in that city, about 1,400 of them, is going to be visited before this election happens. An interesting development this week, there's some new video out by opponents of this ordinance, a lot of whom live out of town. The leader of the campaign is a fundamentalist preacher from Oklahoma who's involved with the Passion Play, which is outside the city limits. Among the leading opponents of this Eureka Springs Civil Rights Ordinance is a guy who talks about the bad behavior of homosexuals as being a reason for his opposition to this legislation. He has a past as a serial rapist in Oklahoma, so I think we have a question about behavior influencing where people go and who they associate with. Perhaps they ought to look to themselves first, do you think, maybe? I had a news item this morning about the state of Attorney General Leslie Rutledge's campaign finances. She's still trying to pay off debt. She's $116,000 in debt still, her latest report shows, including $64,000 herself. An interesting tidbit, Dustin McDaniel, the outgoing Attorney General, a Democrat who opposed Rutledge, gave her $2,000 shortly after she won her election. I guess that is bygones be bygones in life. The strange saga of Dexter Suggs continues. He's the Little Rock's interim school superintendent. Blue Hog Report last week broke the news that there are striking similarities between his doctoral dissertation and the work of at least 4 other people. The appearance of plagiarism has not yet prompted a formal response from the State Education Commissioner, Johnny Key, who is Dexter Suggs' supervisor in school board since the state took over the school district. Indiana Wesleyan University told me today that it's aware of the allegations and is proceeding carefully but can't comment specifically. Meanwhile, Suggs today canceled 2 scheduled public meetings, a noon brown bag lunch and a town hall meeting at which he was supposed to appear. Are things happening on the Suggs front? We're just going to have to wait and see. Friday, the State Ethics Commission heard from its director, Graham Sloan, about the meaning of a new state law that supposedly has been styled as an ethics reform measure by the legislature. It implements parts of Amendment 94 approved by voters last fall. We now know that what the legislature recently did pretty well cut the heart out of ethics reform in Arkansas. The legislature gave itself essentially a free pass for taking illegal gifts and for filing inaccurate campaign reports. It said that once notified of having received an illegal gift or filing an inaccurate report, they have 30 days to make it right. No complaint will be considered or filed. It's a sad commentary on where ethics law is in Arkansas, but we already knew from the way they behaved during the legislative session that the new ban on gifts was going to be found in many ways to be avoided, and lobbyists hurried to do so and will continue to do so. Finally, lots of news on the presidential front. You know, Mike Huckabee says he'll announce in a few weeks and hope whether he's going to run for president. Everybody expects him to do so. It's kind of interesting to watch. He's making a big play for the religious right, for one thing, which will undoubtedly help him in the primary, but not necessarily with general election voters. But finally, he's become maybe the leading defender of Social Security and Medicare among the Republican candidates. You know, cutting these big so-called entitlement programs has become very popular among Republicans. Mike Huckabee senses that there are an awful lot of old people who are Republicans, and he's right about that, and they tend to like their Social Security. I know I'm about to get mine, and I'm happy about it. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.